Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening.
Good evening, Brent. How are you?
Let me just see. I'll choose. I'm this guy permanently.
Oh, that's a bit
and how are
scary.
you? Oh yeah, scary me. How are you?
Oh dear, I'm very good. I'm very, very good. Yeah, it's big
You're
important
more
day.
like
Big important day. That's
this
me.
guy?
Yeah, I think that
Or
is me actually. Yeah.
I think actually, to be fair, you're a bit more.
Would you think? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these come from my wife, who's a psychologist, and
Yeah.
these are therapy tools. But what they do, and when I had a look at them, I thought this is the full range of emotions of what I saw this morning with the students. You know, the students who were in shock when they opened their envelope, and it was wow, I can't believe I did that. Parents like that, and it's a lovely moment when you see that face of like wow. Then you have the actual ecstasy of whooping and jumping up and down and that sort of uncontrollable, amazing feeling when you see somebody open the envelope and they know they've got grades, which are fantastic. Mixed in with, of course, why? I'm not happy. I'm a couple of grades, a couple of percentage off, a couple of marks off. What happened to this exam? What inquest? You know, there's something going wrong there. Is it the exam system? Is it the teacher? You know, so you've had a few sort of disappointment turn to anger. You've had some quite embarrassed.
Oh
And
yes.
a little bit ashamed and kind of, I'm sorry about that. Knew it was coming, and just sort of people looking a bit like that. And then you have, in the corner, and a few of those today that were just, inconsolable, disappointed, broken, and you're having to do your best, sort of like, it's not you, it's the exam system. And it sort of makes you sort of go through that litany of emotions. What you only ever get, obviously, reported is the pictures of somebody holding 10 or 9s at a certain level. Schools put on a positive picture. They put the smiling person with the certificate in their hand, and the local press will be all over that, and best results ever. It's not like that for everybody, and I'm sure we all know individuals who suffered at the exam system, which is part of a growing up process. It's an international thing. There has to be some way to grade children. The thing we're going to look at tonight, obviously, is we're going to look at the top line figures, patterns, look at gender, we'll look at the controversy surrounding it, we'll look at regional, we'll look at the disadvantage gap. So a lot of headlines being made today, and a lot of sort of questions asked about the exam system, the nature of the exam system, the culpability of the exam system, the marketization of the exam system, and we'll have a look at what I think is a missed opportunity of the last couple of years to re-look at the exam system itself. So this will try and give a whistle-stop tour. We've got a guest coming on, which you'd like to introduce us to. Samuel, isn't it, Paul?
Sammy, right. Head of school in a big school in Sunderland. Very knowledgeable, very insightful about the whole exam things. He's got some very strong views on the worth really of exams and the purpose that they serve. So really looking forward to Sammy coming on. I was wondering there, and you might not have them all there, but when I was in school on days like this, I used to always look for children who kind of expressed a different emotion, one they very much wanted to hide, and that was fear. It's an awful lot of fear. I think Brent has frozen now. Oh, he's back. It's an awful lot of fear for children because they don't know really where they're going, what their options are. They don't know what 12 years of education means for them, where can it take them in life. And we're very much about outcomes in life and moving on. So fear is a big issue, I think, as well.
I think fear, anxiety,
worth, self-worth,
value, self-worth. I mean, it's for me, getting my exam results was a vindication of what I felt, because I was a failure. I failed my 11 plus, which I'm not going to lie to you, left a bit of a scar to be branded at 11 years old, an academic failure, and then streamed into the comprehensive system in Northern Ireland, where a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, I thought you were clever. You weren't so clever." And then I rejoined the grammar system, so I got my GCSEs, decent GCSEs from the secondary school. What's interesting is that in my anecdotal evidence, a lot of my friends at GCSE did okay at GCSEs, went on and did brilliant at BTECs, vocationals, ended up at university, and have been infinitely successful compared to some individuals who went to grammar schools at 11 years old. So one of the things about education people forget is it's a journey. It's, you know, I say to some students today, you get your GCSEs and then you start your A levels. Nobody worries what you got at your GCSEs. Once you finish your A levels, you know, you get into university or you go on to there. Nobody worries what you got in your A levels or when you start your job or you start your degree. And then when you get your degree and you start your job, nobody worries about what you got in your GCSEs, what you got in your A levels, or even the quality of your degree becomes purely academic, and then it's on to your master's and it's on to your PhD. People forget that it's a journey education, and some people it's I think there's a very famous Irish quote about it. It's not the person that can hit the hardest, it's the person that can take the most and still get back up again. And I think today that resilience, that stoicism, some people are going to get hit hard, and it is who's around them, how they're going to get recovered, how are they going to pick themselves back up. And in my own experience, some of the people who I've seen be successful in life have had that character, that support network, and they've had something about them that says, right, okay, I haven't done so well here, but I'm going to prove a point. And I think everybody along some stage of their life has that sense of failure. It's a driving test, whether it's exams, whether it could be relationships. We've all have to deal with it. But
I'm sure, Brent, I'm sure we'll come to it, but what you're describing there, and I'm going to say basically in one word, I'm going to say it grit. Well, give me two words, grit and determination. But would that not be a better measure of, you know, the character and the worth of a person? Wouldn't employers love to have people of grit and determination rather than necessarily somebody who is branded as having 7 GCSEs?
Absolutely, because I mean, it's a strange thing sometimes that people can have a bad experience and recover from it, but it does create character, it does create strength, and it does inform. It's about learning, isn't it? I mean, I took my licks when I failed my 11 plus and said, right, well, fine, okay, I'll go to the secondary school. But when I got to the grammar school, I was determined to prove my worth. But I had what we call a rescuing factor, aka mum and dad, and the competition with my brother, which was healthy. I do worry that we live in a society now which is too quick to label, too quick to stream, and what we'll move on to, I think, is unfortunate. I don't think people get an equal opportunity to recover because they don't get an equal opportunity to education to begin with. They, depending where they live, where's their resits, can they afford the resits, and then there's a psychological impact. With me, I used the failure of my 11 plus to make me stronger. But I know in some other people, they just reinforced their own self-worth and value. And it kind of fed into a Carol Dweck-ish, you know, learned behavior of, I'm not so clever, I'm not with the not so clever people, and here we are. And I think there's starting to happen a lot in education where kids themselves say, well, I got what I deserved, I didn't try. There's a little bit of that of, I didn't try. I mean, the kids I didn't see this morning were obviously the ones who know the envelope is going to contain some of the grades they know they're going to get. And already, you know, they are at that stage, aren't they? They are literally like, they know what's coming because they haven't tried. Now, why haven't they tried? They're not interested. They don't like the exam system. They had something set up with regards to school. I think there's something about the value and worth, and I think that's obviously what Sam will move on to, the value and worth of education, the value and worth of exams, or the purpose, what exams are. So we'll do a read from our sponsor, and then we'll have a look at some statistics and some of the number crunching. Here he is. Are you going to read, or shall I read? Or
am I doing it? Oh, Brent, that was what they call ball watching. There, it's like a spectator watching the game, and I forgot I'm in the game.
So, well, I'm not even here. No, I'm not here anymore.
No, don't worry. Our sponsor this evening is John Catt Educational. And if you go to johncattbookshop.com and use the code JCTTR2425, they're going to be very generous and they're going to give you 20% off your order.
That way.
So,
That way. I'm trying to point to it. It's the opposite. My brain's not working that way. So let's have a look at
you're
some.
wrongly wired.
Oh, we all know that, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or maybe like Leonardo. I often think Leonardo da Vinci. If we put Leonardo da Vinci, the genius, into an exam hall, and his words can only be read backwards in America, we would probably label him some.
Yeah, of course we would. Yeah.
Educational sort of anomaly, because he would not fit the parameters of our exam system, and yet the man was a genius. Einstein would. You take some of the most creative genius and some of the most intelligent people you probably know. Are they going to sit for 2 hours in an exam hall and regurgitate? I don't think that, you know what I mean. And that comes back to we'll have a look at. But let's have a look at the statistics.
Yeah.
And then whack up there, Lucy. Whack up some of those graphics about the headline figures. So we have GCSE grades fall back towards pre-pandemic levels is the headline. So much in line with last year, with the exception obviously of Northern Ireland, which hit hard this year. They had their sort of redressing their balance, which England had more of last year. So we're getting more back in line to 2019. But even that in itself, it's always annoying me to the point of like they're purposely engineering the exam results to pull them back to levels. How's that fair year on year? Oh, I'm sorry, you were the year that had to be pulled down. Oh, great for us. So by accident of birth, some years are having. Now, again, here's the problem. When you're comparing exams year on year or like for like, how's that for? Or how's your department compared? Oh, well, our department's compared to this compartment this year. Are you in? It's very hard to get a read of where your actual exam results are. When it's very obvious, somewhere along the line, somebody is statistically pulling it down and playing around with the bell curve. And that's really what this is as well, isn't it? Because that calls into question for me the legitimacy of the exams and how they have to be taken, I think, in isolation year on year. But that's not how it works, because people are looking for trends. A bit like I'd say the Ofsted statistics of schools are graded outstanding and think, right, well, you change the goalpost and you change statistics. How can you compare like for like? Yeah. It's like comparing prices when there's price inflation. You know, a pint, how much does a pint cost now? Well, you have to understand how much did a pint cost when wages cost. It's all relative, isn't it? And I think this is our problem with these statistics. But the headline figure is GCSEs have decreased. Now, you could say, oh, that's okay. The students aren't as good. But that's not necessarily the case. This is in engineering, not the system. Yeah, but they're bringing it. And again, is that a sort of thing of they don't want the kids to get too far ahead, because then it a bit like a currency devaluation, isn't it? This is grade inflation. So they're pulling the grades down to say, let's get it back to pre-pandemic levels. So that's the headline figures. In 2024 is roughly back to where they were in 2019. Move on to the next one, Lucy. So I think Branwen, when I read this, I thought this was a really good analysis, and she is on the money, Branwen. We've had her on a couple of times on Teacher Talk Radio, because I think somebody works in education as an education reporter. She pretty much finger on the button. She says, in many ways, the GCSE gives us a better picture of what's happening to teenagers during the COVID pandemic. Fair enough, I agree with that. When the gap widened, the wealthiest and most disadvantaged, we saw that with the rogue algorithm. We saw how some disadvantages baked into the system were coming through in the exam system. And I think we're still seeing that. That's because unlike A-levels, or of any vocational subjects, almost every teenager takes maths and English. So it gives you a really good benchmark across the country, isn't it? So it's something standardized for every child taking maths and English. You can make a judgment then based upon that. They're also crucial passports to college courses. If you get below a grade 4, you have to resit and pass. So you can see how many people are resitting, but you can also see where they're resitting. So if you look at last year's GCSE maths results, in Surrey, 80% of the grades were 4 or above, and Cornwall and County Durham was below 70%. So again, there was a regional difference, and regional difference you can see is actually increasing. There's a correlation, to use the geography and maths terminology, a correlation between postcode and educational outcome. Who knew? Of course there is. Education Secretary President promised to narrow the disadvantage gap. Well, doing what exactly? Because the thing is, in any of this, nobody's talking about educational reform here of the exam system. So they're talking about changing the social statistics on, sure sort centers and things like that. That's great. Yeah. But what about the actual examination system, the whole GCSE itself? They're not talking about any reform of the actual sitting in an exam hall for 2 hours and regurgitate. That's not in question here. It's about it's poverty, it's the social side of things. And I think that's true, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?
Well, there's a lot more to it, but yeah. And I listened to Claire McKinnell today as well. And I'm sure we'll quote her once or twice, but she was most insistent. I wrote it down. We're absolutely committed to ensuring every person gets opportunities, no matter where they live or what their background they come from. But, even in as far as we've gone in the program already, we can see it's not a fair or level playing field. There are algorithms that come in that change results. There are regional differences. Maths and English are particularly down, the significant number of fields. They're going to raise the costs to resets, which is going to put a number of families and indeed a number of schools at disadvantage as well. So,
those are one of the things today in my life experience. I have a student who's 2 marks off, and I know I'm questioning the validity of the exam. I'm not happy with it. They've never got below a certain level, and they're 2 grades way off where I think they should be. And I don't think it doesn't sit well with me, and they're two marks off. Now, if I was in a more affluent school, that 2 marks off would be like, yeah, send it off. They send off a good third of their exam papers. I am under instructions that it's 1 mark. The parent has to pay. Now, that discourages then the number of marks we send off. And in a system, I think, in a system like history, English, or those are very, I look at when we do moderation, it's like, because I look at a piece and somebody can say, it's a level 3. No, it's a level 4. They are difficult to mark because they are very subjective, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think that the margin for error in those subjects is greater. I mean, the amount of times you've had English papers sent back and you think, what's going on here? And for me, the biggest thing about the exam system is we teachers pride ourselves on the quality of feedback. Kids don't do well. We diagnose, we analyze, we show them, we model. You get none of that in this exam system. You pretty much get sitting in a hall. You don't know what the kids have done. You just then basically, it's like doing your driving test, and the driving instructor turns around and says at the end of it, you failed. What have I failed on? You failed.
Yeah.
Well, how would you know how to be a better driver? How would you then trust the validity of the driving test and go, well, hold on a second here. What did I fail on? Oh, I tell you what you have to do. If you really want to do the test again, here, pay me some more money. What would you do if that driving test was like that? Imagine our driving instructor didn't give you any feedback, didn't tell you where you failed, waited 3 months to turn around and give you the feedback, and then lined you all up and said, here's a piece of paper, and by the way, you failed, you've passed, you failed, you've passed, you failed, you've passed, you failed. And then you have no indication whatsoever of what you've actually failed or passed on, unless, of course, you want to hand over some money to the exam instructor and say, oh, okay, by the way, can I redo the test again? But I don't think the system works in a modern sense the way we teach.
It's anti-educational. It's anti-educational. I mean, we wouldn't get away with our teaching like that. You don't just teach a topic in history and then that's it, you move on. And I mean, if Ofsted come in and look and see you doing that, you are going to be pinned to the wall and made to account for what you do. But education is about learning. And I think, if exams are kind of the final end and they're a summative end after 12 years or 14 years of learning, there should be some detailed feedback. Children should be able to know how they've done in detail. And if, they need to repeat something, be a good guide in what they need to do before they have their repeats.
And that's the thing as well, is we can ask for scripts and all the rest of it. But then you see the differences. I ask for scripts and I can see some people have made annotations. I can see the inconsistencies. But then you query that and it doesn't get changed. And so I have to, again, say the same thing I said last year and the same results tonight, the same thing I say every time. How fair is our exam system? How consistent is our exam system? How consistent is it between subjects? How transparent is our exam system? And literally, how fit for purpose is it in the modern world where feedback, as we told, and maybe I'm reading it wrong when I did my master's degree, and one of the modules was on feedback. Feedback needs to be quick, it needs to be purposeful, it needs to be there. And when you're giving kids exam results months after they've done an exam, and you're then giving them a simple number and saying, here's what you got, with no indication whatsoever. I tell you what it does. It sets us up because we're the ones who then have to deal with parent who goes, teacher's fault, school's fault. And you're thinking, well, actually, I can't tell you where your child's got wrong. Number one, because I wasn't in the exam hall. And number two, I'm not your child. And number three, It's 2 months since they actually 3 months since they actually done it. And then in between, they've had how many other exams? So I think the whole way.
Can we look at that for a minute, Brent? Because I'm retired now, and even though I'm retired, you kind of, you enjoy the day, but yes, you have concerns for those children that we talked about. And I've had a few colleagues who phoned me and so on today. How much do teachers feel responsible for results? I know what I felt when I was there, but it's 2 years I'm out of the classroom. I'm asking you, how responsible do teachers feel for the results their cohort gets?
Honestly, completely.
Yes, honestly,
completely. Yeah. And you then look at a child and you say, you think to yourself, there's two kids there, and I think, have I failed? Have I failed? And you have that emotion of, what have I taught them wrong? Have I taught them that wrong? Again, it goes back to me. What did I not prepare them for? Let's think of the questions. Let's analyze. And I will spend the next couple of days going through every question, analyzing what question, going through the 4 exam papers, going through the 4 topics, going through the genders, going through pupil premium, going through my level 4 boys, level 5 boys, analyzing the 39 children in my department, and then the other department, and then the faculty, comparing them to the school, compare myself to other teachers, compare myself to national averages, compare myself to similar children. And all of that will then come into a feedback loop of like, well, here is some of the theories of why attendance issues, behavioral issues. There's about 50 different things that then, and I then will have to say to myself, I'll have to have a meeting, of course. And this is the thing with a lot of schools. Teachers' careers have been destroyed because of exam results. Let's be honest about that. People have been hounded out of the profession. People have been judged. They have had taken full responsibility for the exam results. And sometimes they're kept 100% responsibility. In other words, it's a really good graphic about, isn't it? The 70s child is chastised by their parents because they didn't do well, whereas the 2010s child, the parents are pointing at the teacher saying, why is the child doing well?
Yeah.
And that's the problem now. We are, much like I equate it to football managers.
Well, it is the football manager approach, isn't it? Yeah.
How much of the players are responsible? How much of the football manager? How much of the coaching? How much is the... And you start to ask yourself those questions. We, as teachers, ultimately want our kids to do well, and you soul search. So today I've had that mixed emotions of, have I done it right? Have I taught them right? Maybe I didn't consolidate. Maybe I didn't do enough mock exams. And it all goes into a matrix of like, why did this child do well? Why did this child not do well? And one was honest with me and said, I did a bad exam, sir. And I go, okay, I've got that one explained. Okay, what about this one? Why did this one do so well and this one not do so well? And there's 50, bad day, bad questions. And you do all of that to yourself. And then somebody piles in on you and says, well, this other department did well. Why aren't you doing well? Well, that other department doing well. Maybe you need... And I have a really good quote of that. I want to put that quote up, Lucy, about interventions. And it says about our school didn't do well. So what we did was we did a lot of interventions, but we didn't do well. So we did more interventions. That was the answer, because the answer was I wasn't working hard enough, or I wasn't doing enough marking, and you fall on your sword, and you can't help but fall on your sword because you want the best for those children. But ultimately, I'll put down to Paul. When I failed my driving test, my driving instructor was sitting in the back, right? And I keep using the driving test as an analogy because it is a test that's standardized, a similar thing in that sense. You prepare for it, you get into it, and then you get rabbit in the headlights. I messed up my first driving test completely spectacularly. Driving instructor sitting in the back going, what are you doing? You normally do that well. And I think to myself, what was it? Why did I do that? I was in a strange car. I was driving through a strange area. I didn't prepare myself, right? I went into it thinking I got a bit cocky about it. And the second time around, I learned from the mistake. My driving instructor had no bearing whatsoever on my failure of my driving test. In fact, first thing I said to the poor guy was like, my God, I'm really sorry for that. You did not teach me that. You don't deserve. But imagine you have a world where your driving instructors are put onto competency and skills because of the number of people they pass.
Brent, maybe we should bring Sammy in there. I see he's in our lovely green room. He's waiting patiently there. He's actually got a green wall behind him there.
I like that Sammy is showing a little bit of this.
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
You're very welcome. You're most welcome on the show. I was thinking earlier, and we were talking about football. 1974, wasn't that was Sunderland's era, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the famous final was 1973, the Montgomery final.
73.
Sorry, enemy.
Yeah.
And in
Very
fact,
good.
I knew none of this, but I taught in London for 12 years. Then I moved up to the Northeast, started in Sunderland 10 years ago, and we opened a sixth form, and Jimmy Montgomery was the celebrity to open it. But I had to find out who he was first, and the kids were shocked that I didn't know.
They would be. So, Sammy, how did results go in your school today?
I mean, it's always a strange experience because, if you kind of go at the headlines and you look at all that, it's great. We're making progress. We had a really tough pandemic, and we're really proud of all the work that everyone's done. But that isn't how a teacher experiences them. You experience them by looking for the problems and then feeling for the kid that's not done the thing, and
it's
thinking
the kid that deserves to do well. And they deserve it. And then you have the opposite. There's the kid who somehow winged it, somehow broken all the rules, somehow broken the system, who's smiling at you, and you think, how did you do that? And then there's that child you're looking over going like, how have you not got the grade you deserve? And you look at them and you go, I'm sorry. And I said this to a child today. It's not you. It's this system. You are not this piece of paper. I did that line. You haven't let me down. I am still proud of you. I won't think any less of you. You will recover from this. But I won't get into college. And I literally much said, if I have to go to the school next door, get on my hands and knees and beg them to take you, they should be proud to take you in. And I'm going to have to probably do that. But that's how you feel, isn't it? It's you just want the child who works so hard to get the reward, and it doesn't. It just doesn't work like that, does it?
But I think this is where so I experienced the day as you do as a teacher with that disappointment and then the joy, and actually that disappointment I often feel on the day before because I'm seeing the results and looking at them. Then on the day I often feel the joy. And it's great. And really, I want to say well done to everyone at Southmore. They did fantastically. And to the other school in our Matt Sandell View, really, really brilliant. But then I come to my, deeper issues with the whole system. And this is what I write about and what I've been trying to bang the drum for. And it's not as simple as saying exams are bad, because we know as teachers that exams are, they're a fantastic tool for learning, aren't they? They're a really good way of getting people to remember stuff and to understand things. But the big lie of the system is the transaction that we sell to the kids, that we say, implicitly or explicitly, we say, do these things and you will get a good life. Do these things and things are going to be fine. And it's both a lie because it is literally a lie. There is not a direct correlation between educational achievement and, wealth and comfort. Otherwise, I think we'd all be sitting in very different situations as teachers who, by definition, have done well in school. It isn't the case. The people who are most academically qualified are academics, and they certainly aren't the best paid, are they? So that whole thing of your grades are going to get you this wonderful place in the sun isn't true. But then there's a kind of deeper thing as well, which is that, exams represent achievement, absolutely, but they don't represent the level of fine-grained achievement that they claim to. There's so much research onto this. And also there's just the basic facts of it from what we've just been talking about. You have a kid who just doesn't perform on the day. That doesn't objectively make them worse than they were before they sat down in that hall that day. These aren't an actual measure of worth. And if we treat them like they're a measure of worth, then we are, we're devaluing education. We're saying education is about the end product rather than the process. And that's a tragedy, I think.
I think it's the market forces that really annoy me, that you literally have to have that economic background. You pay for the exam, you pay for the resits. The marking itself is not transparent. If you're a customer, if you're a customer buying into these exams, you wouldn't be buying them. I wouldn't be buying them. I certainly wouldn't be buying them, because I draw the parallel to an exam the student's going to sit in a year's time. That's their driving test. If their driving test ran like our exam system, it wouldn't operate as a business. But yet it's allowed to operate as a business. And yet you literally, people selling your kind of snake oil of, here, do this course, go to this person. And it's a whole kind of system that we've created, which bakes in advantage, because it's not by accident that certain trusts, certain schools and certain postcodes, we have the statistics of London doing well versus the Northeast not doing so well, and Humberside not doing so well, and in West Midlands not doing so well. But we know that. But therefore, the whole education system should be the one thing that you level up at. I mean, I'm somebody who did get through the education system because there was an education system in Northern Ireland which allowed a working class kid like me to get to a grammar school and achieve. Because for me, as part of my family, they had 24 cousins, and 22 out of 24 of my cousins all went to university from a working class background. That wouldn't happen in England. That wouldn't happen now. And it's not that we valued education, but we valued what the educational outcomes proved, which is our worth, that we were more confident, more, and it's that kind of success the education can bring you, of giving you that cultural capital, that confidence to take on the system, to fight, to stand up for yourself, to have that sort of ability to say, I've got this piece of paper that gives me the sort of respect that I've earned that. And that's why I don't think the exam system allowed, because a lot of our kids I see are beaten before they start, because they already know from SATs or from their level, their levels are set. And I think there's a hell of a lot of Carol Dweckism in the sort of, I'm at that level, I'm not going to work because why? I'm forced to do it. And I think the curriculum is not very innovative. I think it's narrow. It's become narrower. We're forcing kids into humanities. We're forcing kids into languages. They don't want to do them. And then kids are saying, well, I'm switched off because the curriculum is overloaded, bloated. And there's us teachers then saying, come on. We're doing our best motivational stuff. And the kids just aren't feeling it.
Yeah. I do agree with you, but I think that there is something that we have to, I feel like this moment in time, we've had the change of government, and we're in a place and a point where things seem up for grabs and up for discussion in a way that they haven't been before. And I think the thing that I would make the case for very, very strongly is that, I agree with much of what you've said, but I think that we have to think bigger in the education system. Because I think for too many years, we've seen schools as these discrete little factories that fill you with knowledge and then put you out into a destination that's appropriate to you. But schools are intrinsically of their communities. And people grow up in a place and with the characteristics that are taught them by that place. Now, as I said, I taught for 12 years in London, and then I came to Sunderland. And the qualities of the kids are radically different because of the social context they operate in. It's not levels of deprivation, it's local cultural context. And what I think that we have to be so aware of, when we think of health outcomes, when we think of the NHS, we don't think of a hospital as just the place that fixes everything. We think of a hospital as part of a network of GPs and health and social care and all the other things around it that actually feed into it. And then we also think of health as something that sits within wider habits and opportunities in society. And I think we've got to think of education in that way. Schools work when they're within a functional network, but they also work when opportunities are there in the local area. Now, for a number of years, I was on the Social Mobility Commission, and it was a fascinating thing. It was a really interesting thing to do. I ended my time there feeling very, very ambivalent about the term social mobility because of the second word, because of the mobility. Because a lot of the time, what we ask people to do is we say, if we can prove you're worth it through the education system, then you better get the hell out of Dodge and get away from where you're from. Go somewhere different, because
you're looking at an example. It's a brain drain, isn't it? And I am a walking, talking example of said brain drain. In fact, it's one of the things about the greatest export of our country is intelligent people who are now in Westerners. And I think the same thing's happening in England. Even our teachers are now brain draining because they're not even only just qualified enough. They go to another country. I've done a whole show about that. And people talk about the migration debate. They don't talk about the 600,000 people that left last year. And if I look at my 20-year career, some of my brightest and best and I'm in the deindustrialized area of the East Midlands, which is in one of the lowest sort of areas, massively old mining communities. It's got all of those factors leading into it: low attitudes, higher crime, and just that sort of sink estate mentality of that'll do, that's okay, it's not the ambition, it's not the desire. But then when I look at the area around, there isn't the employers, there isn't that cultural capital, there isn't that sort of motivation, that confidence. I think confidence, pride, there's a sense of worth, sense of achievement, a sense of, because for me, there was a value. Those exam results for me were a value. I needed to get them in order to get kudos from my parents, get kudos from my family. That was my rescuing factor. That was my motivation. Because for me, then the exam results were an extension of, this is a pride thing. Getting this was a way. It's a bit like a competition, like winning the league. I don't see that in a lot of the children. They're just for want of a better word, simply not bothered. They get more from social media. They get more, and even they often have this sort of thing of like, I don't need. There's a prevalence now of, I don't need exams. I don't need GCSEs. I don't need education. And that's starting to become more normal now, where people are devaluing education. I think because the examination system, as we're saying, is not fit for purpose. Therefore, everybody's saying, well, you know what, I don't need exams. And everybody's come up with an example of, I didn't do so well and I recovered. So there's a contradiction in there, isn't there? There's a contradiction of, we say to the kids, you need the exams, and then the opposite, don't worry, you'll be okay without them.
I think you're absolutely right with that. And I think there's two things at work there. One is there is a deep cognitive dissonance, which we've kind of embedded into the system, whereby because we tell this transactional lie, because we say, do this and you're going to have the great life, do well in GCSEs and everything's going to be great. That's the thing you need to do. If you don't do well in your GCSEs, it's going to be shit. It's going to be rubbish. And then we're saying this to kids. I know we're not saying those words, but we're saying that the meaning of that. And then they're sitting at home and they're looking around all the people they love. And the people they love are not those people who've done well in their GCSEs. And in effect, what we're asking them to do, even when home is ostensibly supporting school, even when it's kind of saying, we have those parent meetings, don't you, where the dad says, I never did well at school, and I just, you got to do well at school. But the message we're giving the kids is essentially asking them to step away from what they know and love, and to deny what they know and love, and to step into a world that seems ill-defined at best, and actually they have no real grasp on. They have no real understanding of that this is actually going to function for them.
But are we not right to do that, Sammy? Are we not right to be right in there beside those children, regardless of what the grandparents and the children and the fathers are saying, and motivate that child and help them to see? Now, I live in Northern Ireland, and we've lots of places that you might refer to as dodge. A lot of places that people need to get out of here for lots of reasons. I don't like it, but is it not a ticket to a better life for a lot of children?
Yeah, now this is the thing. So, in my book, one of the things I try and say again and again is education is massively complex. It's paradoxical. There is no easy win for everyone. It's trade-offs against each other. So yes, you're right with that. But I think that, I guess what I'm saying is we need to make the case for education, because education makes a difference. But the case we need to make is not a transactional one. It's a case for the worth of education.
It's not the silver bullet, is it? It's part of a complex sort of myriad of things that you need.
Yeah. It's part of understanding the world. It's part of engaging with the world. It's worth it. And there's a really interesting bit of research I did with my local primary schools.
Because for me, it's the key ingredient. Is confidence.
Yeah.
And if I look at some of our children, they don't have. But I think secret ingredients, motivation and confidence. And I look at those children who do well, and you say, well, because they're, and again, it goes back to the boys and girls. And I notice the boys and girls gap is narrowing. And my theory on that is that the terminal exams, when it takes all casino kind of system, suits the boys a little bit more, whereas the coursework, more methodical over a longer period of time, the old system seem to suit the girls a bit more. And funny enough, anecdotally, from my own example, seeing some of the boys going in there, they just have that little bit more of blasé, a little bit more confident, swagger. I don't know what it is, but they just go in and cope with that pressure and stress a little bit more. Whereas I've noticed some of, especially my really high achieving girls, when they go in exams, do sometimes freeze, do sometimes sort of beat themselves up a little bit. They don't have this, and yet they're so talented, but you can't say to some people they just don't have that. It's hard to describe. They just don't have that confidence, resilience. They're just nervous. They're scared. There's a psychological thing that goes on, and I don't think we're preparing the children for. We put them through the exam system, which I think breaks. Let's be honest, it breaks some children who don't have the networks around them. And I think we break them and we don't put them back together. We just simply, tonight, there are going to be children who are going to be in a really, really bad place. And I think it's a harsh, cruel, nasty system. I mean, that's my take on it. I mean, others may disagree. But how would we change it?
Well, I mean, before I say the thing I think that we need to move towards, I'll just say this thing about this research I did with my local primary schools. And I found later that this has actually been borne out in other research people have done on a larger scale. I just asked the kids, they were year 5. I asked them, did they know what they wanted to do in life as a career? And did they intend to go to university? And did their parents go to university? And I, cross-referenced all the data. And it's fascinating. Apparently, this is a widely known effect that if you look at the disadvantaged cohort, they are far more likely to have a clear idea of what they want to do as an adult. They have a clearer idea of career path that they're going to follow. And when you go to the more advantaged cohort, and particularly those who've had parents in education, they're far more likely to be uncertain. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because actually what you see there, that is because we have this, the middle class understanding of education is one that actually recognizes intrinsic value in education. And yet we don't make the effort to sell that to the disadvantaged and kids from non-higher educated backgrounds. What we do instead is we give them this narrative of monetary success and career success, which they don't buy. And I think what we have to do is we have to say, my kind of mantra is that I want everyone to be an educated, well-rounded citizen. I don't care what job you do. Right? I don't care about skills for the workplace. The work can teach you skills for the workplace. What I want you to do in school is I want you to learn to love poetry, to enjoy drawing, to understand art, to understand science, so that when you're out in the world, you get the things that are happening around you and you have an enriched life. And I don't think that's something that should be exclusive to certain, income brackets.
Would you think then, and again, looking at the statistics, forcing the children into subjects that they wouldn't choose because the point score of the school has to be increased because they're in open bucket, closed bucket, open bucket, closed bucket, because Ofsted would like them to do more languages, is exactly the opposite what we need to be doing with some children, because we need to be saying them, do creative arts, do iMedia, do art design. And I have the statistics on it. They're showing as intakes has increased, the number of children taking exams has increased because our cohort is up. The number taking music, performing arts, drama has all dropped off. Why? Because there's not the kudos in that. And you tell me one thing about this country, one thing Britain does well is performing arts and drama. For flipping hell, you've got damn Shakespeare from Tennyson to keep. I mean, tell me about that. Hollywood is dominated by British actors, playwrights, and producers. Yeah. It's probably one of the greatest things about Britain is its cultural output. And yet we say to our kids in school, yeah, do English, but only do these prescribed texts in a prescribed text way,
But I think this breadth thing is a really interesting one, because actually, in my research, I came to some conclusions that I didn't expect. And, one of them is actually, I think choice is a real problem. Not post-16. Post-16, I think, is different. But, Key Stage 4, choice is a problem because kids think that they're choosing something that's going to lead in a particular direction, but they don't have a proper choice. And the things that they're choosing don't actually impact on their later career choices anyway. So I think what we should be doing for the GCSE is I think we should be offering a single passport qualification. I think it should be a kind of knowledge rich by all means, but I think that it should be cross-disciplinary. So, for example, I don't see any point in the English language exam. Why would we get people to look at unseen extracts that are on irrelevant topics that they've never encountered before.
Yeah.
Why not get them to analyze something that they're actually learning about? Give them a history text and give them an English test on a history text. Use that kind of actual coherence to the body of knowledge in our favor. But the point is, if you had a single qualification, then you could do things that our current system doesn't. It's astonishing that it doesn't do this. Take child development. Right? Now, I don't know about your schools. In my school, there was one boy who did child development, and he hated it because all the other kids in the class were girls.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that is absolutely nuts. Because the one thing I can guarantee about most of the kids going through the school is they're going to have to deal with a kid at some point. Whether it's theirs or someone else's. Like, if there was ever a subject that should be compulsory for all kids, it's child development. And yet it gets hived off into this weird little silo at the edge. And then again, we've talked about creative subjects, but, vanishingly small numbers of people sit down and, do a little bit of glaciation research in their adult lives. But I tell you, a hell of a lot of them go to art classes. That's the stuff which sticks with you.
But that's lifelong. We're just going to interrupt a second because we've got to do our sponsor. We'll come back and we'll have a look at some of I want your take on the regional and the variations, the gender, the regional, just some of the headlines today, Sammy, and what you think the next step. So I'll give you a little bit of thinking time. What would I'm going to ask you the question, if you're Bridget Phillipson now, and you've kind of alluded to a little bit, what would you do? And I'm posing the question, would you stick with our exam system or would you twist? And if you twist, what would you change? Because for my money, I think we should abolish it at 16. I don't think we're the only country that seems to have an exam system at 15, 16. Looking at the brain development at 14, I don't think it's the right time. So I would almost go straight, like some private schools do. I think we should examine the children at 17, 18 and just skip that stage. I don't see the reason why we have to have GCSEs, especially now that children don't leave school technically till 17. Why are we examining at 16 when it's day of education? So for me, I would push it back a year and give them just that little bit extra brain development time. Because I think some of the 15-year-olds sitting exams, especially some of the less mature 15-year-olds, are a massive disadvantage. But I'll leave you with that thought while we have a quick read of our sponsor. And how do we change the exam system when we come back?
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Brilliant. All right, so we've got regional divide, we've got disadvantage gap, we've got exams which we're questioning the validity of how the exam boundaries are set and how they are somehow lowered and elevated year on year. How do we change and how do we fix the exam system? And is it full open surgery or is it tweaked? So what do you think?
So I have two answers. I'm going to cheekily, go in both directions here because essentially I think that full open surgery is necessary in the long term, but the system is on its knees right now and no schools can cope with that level of disruption now. And when you look at, the really successful examples of school reform, the key element of it is to try and make it consensus-based and to take the planning and the thinking beyond single terms of parliament. The most destructive thing that we can do is set up a ping pong between extreme versions of what education should be. We need to actually get in a room together and decide properly what we all believe we should be doing going forward. And I think that consensus is possible. So I think that, yes, we need deep reform, but it needs to be not rushed. And I think effectively it therefore needs to be planned through looking and, carefully and reviewing things and then proposed before the next general election so people have a chance to properly think about it and look at it. Now, what that research would consist of, I agree with you. I think it's all about the GCSE level. what I've outlined already about the idea of a single qualification, I think is key. Interestingly, I would go, you talk about pushing it later, I would go earlier. Now, the rationale for this is that actually one of the other problems we've got in our system is the emptiness around Key Stage 3 and the function of Key Stage 3. And I think what you do is you have a qualification that kids take at 15 that doesn't have a fine-grained grading system that has a maybe pass merit distinction at most, that effectively it's a passport, you get over the edge of it, it's like the driving test. By doing it at 15, what you're doing there is you're saying there's no choice, here are all the elements you need to do, including child development, including creative subjects, and including, I think, a version of the extended project, which I think is one of the best qualifications that we've come up with in the last
international baccalaureate style.
Yeah, like all the elements fit together. So it's a single thing, so you can control the burden of exams. You don't have this absolute insanity of kids having a clash of 3 different exams in the same slot day and having to stay till 6 o'clock in the evening. So you do that, but you do it at 15 because then you have an extra year where you have kids either retaking that and making sure they've got to that base standard, or exploring with a kind of stake-free freedom some of the things that they might then go on to do at sixth form, to various extension courses, trying out apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are such an interesting thing because they really do work for lots of kids. But isn't it mad that they have to do them without ever having tried it?
True.
You do A-level geography, and you've done some geography before.
It's a good point. Not schools don't do work experience. We used to have that. We had at end of year 9. Obviously, there was the end of year 9 SATs. So there used to be end of year 9 SATs for core subjects. And I'm old enough to have taught the modular system, which had coursework and modulars, which unfortunately was open to abuse, because what was happening there was, I remember a conversation with a teacher. A student comes to me and says, "They're my tutors, sir. My teachers put me back into science. Why? I am predicted an A star. I got an A. That's good enough." No, it's not. And that was when I realized education was changing. When the child was told that their A grade wasn't good enough because the head of department wanted them to get an A star, and they were like, "I'm not going to do science beyond this. I'm happy with my A." And I had the parent even got involved and says, "You're not putting my child in for an A star." And that was the problem with the modular system, was it was open to people gaming it and whacking kids in for resets. And again, it was connected to, which the problem is, you mentioned earlier on, the monetization of schools, parents, kids want the numbers. They want the grades, because that's the currency, isn't it? That's what you get the headlines. That's what's on posters today. That's what the local news press is going. That's what the child's holding up and going, "Here's our top student with 9 stars." Is the headlines where you get everywhere, here's our lining up, here's our students, and schools are in competition with each other. And look, I'm versus it's connected to Ofsted, it's connected to league tables. Every system we have like that is going to be numbers. Do you see what I'm saying? Every system we're going to have is going to be open to abuse, because we've literally created a kind of hot housing, Wall Street-esque examination system, and no matter whatever one we create, it is going to get abused eventually by people who are going to game it.
But I think this is, I think, a really interesting quality that we've got to kind of aim for. So first of all, that kind of reform only works in the context of also reforming performance tables and accountability. Yeah. But the other thing about it is that the design of your qualification affects the way that it works. The kind of parameters you set change the incentives within it. And essentially, my big thing with education is to think about the very, very large structural systemic changes, because I think too often what we do is we tinker around the edges, and what you end up with is a machine that works in 2 different directions and is counterproductive. I think we have to think about the big picture, because the big picture then defines all the things within it. Now, I'll give you a really good example of that is, to come back to the extended project. That is a great bit of curriculum design, because what it did, the most innovative, fantastic thing about the extended project is that when it was designed in consultation with the universities for a specific need to try and promote a certain type of thinking and working. And there was an agreement made whereby the universities agreed that they would never use the extended project as the primary thing in an offer. It would be used to kind of supplement if someone fell down elsewhere, but it would never be primary part of the offer. And equally, the DFE agreed not to make it a primary part. It can help in your league tables, but it does not actually form the backbone of any of the measures. And by taking it out of those two things, essentially what that means is you can have a qualification that is a bit weird and woolly in the way it's assessed, and it doesn't matter because you have the freedom to let kids fail because not so much rides on it. And what you find with the extended project is it is massively open to abuse, but it doesn't matter. Because nothing's riding on it. And so, sure, a kid, if a kid gets someone to help them with it, well, then that's their stupid lookout because they haven't learned as much.
And you see, I've done alternative provision this year for a couple of students to take the pressure off the rest of their GCSEs. And I had the conversation if I could take more students on alternative provision, and it won't count towards the GCSE score. The answer is we can't afford to put more kids into that. And that is interview skills, life skills, financial skills. And I created my own little program of I interviewed some of the boys ended up joining. Didn't realize they got their CVs together for the army. They actually sent them off to the army and got a response back in a year time. So they literally, and it was one of those I thought, oh, wow, I really like this because it is about financial capability. It is about money. It is about the soft skills, interview skills, life skills, working together, collaboration, research skills. I really enjoyed it. But I said, can I have doing that? But the problem is we're tied into the system, which we can't afford to put too many kids through that because we're taking a hit on our point score. And
but
that's what it's up against.
Sorry, that is exactly my point, is that we can't, as individual teachers, innovate our way out of this inside our schools because we're held in the grip of a system that has incentives that are set up in a certain way. This is big picture stuff. And the thing I would say I am encouraged by is, I have shared the book with Bridget Phillipson. She's read it. She says she loves it. There's a receptiveness to this thinking. I don't think it's going to turn around into someone, dismantling the accountability system. But I think there is a receptiveness that will allow these thoughts to kind of come in to the review over the next.
So you think now is the time to push the door that's a lot more open than it used to be?
Exactly. I think but I think what we've got to do is we've got to push it responsibly.
Yeah.
We have to understand that it is not going to be ever politically possible to just simply say, right, we're taking that down, and it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be helpful because there's too many people in the sector invested in it. We have to make
not
change.
Speaking from a political position whatsoever, which wants to abolish league tables, high stakes testing. I think you can guess where my political allegiance lies into, but I would. But I get told off for. I think you've got a point. You radical change ends up if you take the Govian thing because he did the radical change. I think we're seeing how his philosophy has failed. And I can say that. I'm not afraid to say that. I think everything Gove did now has been, even from the curriculum, academic curriculum, the baccalaureate, forcing kids in, monumentally failed whatsoever. So, and that was an educational experiment. So I do take your point, Sammy. As much as I'm a radical individual, you're right about it's got to be evidence informed, hasn't it? I think that's the point you're making. It's got to be evidence informed. And the next person that mentions Finland is wrong because we're not living in Finland. We don't have Finnish children or Singapore because we don't live in Singapore and we don't have Singapore children. And I think your point is a really good, valid one, that whatever has to be done in the context of regions, location, school. What works for one school doesn't work. But even in the United Kingdom, and Paul can back me up on this, Scotland examines the children differently, England examines the children differently, Northern Ireland examines. How can you... United Kingdom, are you absolutely joking? These exam results can never be taken seriously because we're one child's version of an anopolis. And I want to show you these two quotes and your reaction to. This was the top quote today on X or Twitter. We put in exam results or GCSEs. This got 350,000 views currently at the moment. It's 6 hours old. And that's what Amy said. My son passed one of his GCSEs. He's a beautiful, kind, and funny young man. Today, he's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you are, and what it really hurts to see that is education and his school let him down. And that's really hard to think, because going back to what Paul asked me earlier on, if I was that young man's teacher, you would, what do what do you say? You don't know the other side of it. That's true. But how many children in the country, and I think that's why that is so viral, is because I think there are so many out there who are hidden, who are feeling either angry, or they're feeling like that, or they're feeling like that, or or they're feeling like that, and all you'll get today is the headline figures, the statistics, and there's not the story, because every one of those children is a story. And you can see there, Amy Forrester, about one player ahead of GCSE results today. It's the way the media and communication talk about grades 1 to 3 are not fails. So this is, again, it's all about the pass or the fail, isn't it? It's all about the validation of the numbers. Oh, unless you get a 4 or 5, you've failed. One of my greatest achievements today was a student getting a level 5. They were predicted a level 7, but I can tell you the story behind that was one of the most nightmarish experiences of my 20 odd years teaching. But the story between me and that child was a complete rupture and repair and a complete turnaround. But somebody will then come in and say to me, "You failed as a teacher. Your residual is two down." And in my head, myself, I'm 2 down, -2 there. And that's how we are now conditioned to think as teachers. I'm looking at my exam results, looking at the numbers, looking at the statistics. Am I red? Am I green? Am I amber? Oh, am I in trouble? Where am I compared to other subjects? Where am I compared to other teachers? Where am I compared to the national average? And in my head, I can't get beyond the fact that that's that student saying to me, "Wow, look what we did together. I got a level 5. It's an amazing." For me, that level 5 is not a level 5. It's a validation of hard work from me as a teacher and them as a student. But statistically speaking, they've underperformed.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that I do think that there is a good movement at the moment away from the kind of over weaponization of results against teachers. I think it still happens, but I think that the kind of whole performance related pay thing, I think, has been proved not to work, and I think that we're moving away from that. But I think that what I have certainly noticed as a leader in my school is that you say to people again and again that you're not looking at it in that way, but like you say, people are conditioned. Teachers are conditioned to think in those terms, and as a sector, it will take us a long time to get out of that. It's going to take a lot of work from heads and from the DFE to try and kind of move us away from that punitive approach. But I want to pick up on the point you made about Singapore and Finland, because I think this is something I'm really passionate about, because I just think we have to understand that. So Singapore is a great example. People often talk about this, the intensity of the Singapore exam system. Now, my sister-in-law is from Singapore, so I know quite a lot about it, and I know that she doesn't live in Singapore because she's afraid of the intensity of the system, and that's true of a lot of her friends.
It's pretty hardcore.
They don't want to bring their kids up in it. But having said that, I'm also, I really try at all times to see the nuance, the size of it, and there is no doubt that there are many successes there as well. But one of the things about it is that any commentator who simply says, "Oh, what you need is Singapore-style selection and academic rigor," misses the fact that the system was designed in the 60s as part of a highly planned economy with the knowledge of the specific number of kids that needed to go into each sector. And then the capacity of the system was designed around funneling the right number of people to the right jobs. So what that means is that if you're in the Singaporean system and you're not academic, you're funneled in a direction where there is a place for you to go.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing that I would, if anyone is
you're given a worth, you're given a kind of purpose, you're given a function.
Yeah.
I think you've got a point. Back to our earlier point, you're saying about the disadvantaged children know what they're going to do. But let's go back a generation. They knew exactly what they were going to do, because they were going into a vocational thing like Dad used to do. They were going down the mine, they were going into the factory, they were going into the local industry, the steel industry. In our area, it was the steel industry, it was the coal mines. and you knew what the education purpose was because you knew exactly the skills you needed. We were engineers, Rolls-Royce, Toyota, and we had that. Now in the deindustrialized areas, if your Midlands and your North and your red walls and leveling up, we heard the talk about educations are leveling up. They haven't done that. They haven't matched, I think, the educational skills that are needed. Look at the state of ICT, computing science. There's not many kids doing computing. Are you having a laugh?
Yeah.
Why are we not encouraging critical thinking, AI? We are so well behind what is needed for our children. I think part of their demotivation is the fact that they look at the qualifications and say, well, how's this going to benefit me in a world of... I think they're savvier than we think, the kids, aren't they?
Yeah,
I think they're a lot savvier than we think.
And that takes me back to the point that that's why, particularly given the change of the world that we're in, that's why the case we have to make for education is not a case about careers. It's a case about personal enrichment and understanding the world, because the case we make about careers, we frankly don't know. We don't have the knowledge to say that,
Sammy, that's a case. You're really making a case for educating the whole person there, okay? And I know schooling is about academia, okay? And the end product is exams and so on, okay? But do we have to measure that? Do we have to measure academia? And what happens to the other aspects of being a person? Like what happens to our emotional and our spiritual and our physical self? Look, Amy's son, she described him as beautiful, kind, and I can't remember what the third part was, but, he could have a part-time job somewhere, as a barman or working as a waiter somewhere, and it could be tremendous at. His employers could love him in doing that. But there's no signaling anywhere about his kindness, about his hard work, about his diligence. Do we need to kind of, and I know we've talked about this, but do we need to scrap everything and think, we need to indicate or have indicators about what the whole person is and what their strengths and weaknesses are?
I think that part of my answer would be no, because I think that then we would fall into the same trap that we've got here. I think to label something doesn't make it any more real. And I think that, if you have a test for kindness, then you will have people gaming the test for kindness rather than actually being kind.
You will. But I'm not saying it's a test.
I'm 10% kinder than I was previously.
Yeah. Be quite a few teachers feel that, actually.
But you are touching on something important as well, which is how do we measure the intangibles? Not because we need to know whether or not we're doing them. And I also think, and I think it might have been before you came on, Brent and I said, once you've done your GCSEs, they no longer matter. Once you've done your A-levels, they no longer matter. Once you've got your degree, in a sense, it no longer matters, and so on. But what then becomes important are things like your personal qualities. What kind of a worker are you? How do you get on? Are you a troublemaker of a teacher in this school? Because if you are, we're going to regret that we employed you, no matter what your degree is. And there's no forerunner, there's no indication that we may be employing a problem or a difficulty. And I'm just wondering, I'm sure Amy's son is feeling very wounded, very hurt. She's certainly feeling it for him. The system is extraordinarily cruel on people like that. And yes, it spans the gamut. There are people jumping up with joy and hugs and all those things, But what happens? Are people like Amy's son, are they just discarded and discarded in every aspect? He'll not, if he has a job as a waiter, he'll not go in with his head held high and a happy fella tomorrow. I think the thing that we have to try and get to is, I think that what's very hard is to kind of put kind of numbers and definitions on these intangibles. But what is possible is to allow enough of a range of achievements within a school that everyone can feel good about themselves on leaving it. And I think that's the thing that would help Amy's son in this situation. because if you're able to say that, you know, and actually this is where I would come back to, you know, the extended project as a model for some of the thinking I think that we can do. If we can, you know, have things that are about distance traveled and progress made for individuals, that's something which can recognize the students who don't get the recognition at the moment. And this just takes me to a side point which I've always found bizarre. Isn't it weird?
Oh dear!
Isn't it weird?
Dear!
What a way to end it!
Oh dear!
I tell you what.
Sammy's back. He's back.
Isn't it weird? He's just a
So
weird.
I'll tell you what's weird then. So what is weird is that we measure progress for schools and not for kids.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
You know, like
does the record of achievement still exist in England?
No.
Oh, the whole wine list.
Yeah,
it would be the wine list.
The wine list.
Leather.
But that hits upon an interesting point, because when you go for a job interview, you're asked for, tell me about a time when you. I mean, I've taken kids to an enriching experience to Borneo, and they're we're all up against the private schools. So that's the other thing with the system, because it's baked in that even some private schools don't even do GCSEs, do they? They just say to them, you go straight to A levels, whereas our kids have to sit them, and that surprises me that they can just bypass GCSEs and say, you don't need them. You're going straight into A levels and give you that time to get ready for your A levels. But the thing is, it's about trying to get the children to have experiences, life experiences. One of the things you keep seeing now is parents saying, you don't just learn at school. True. I'm taking the kid off for a holiday because they'll learn a lot on the holiday. We don't do work experience. We don't have time to do pantomimes. When I started teaching 20-odd years ago, I'm sounding old here, we did pantomimes, school plays, more sports. There was more enrichment activities, more clubs, more societies, more of the joy, fun. And school had time. Teachers could basically learn their lines and do a pantomime, rock concerts. And I think, when's the last time we did any of that? And I was asking questions to colleagues in other schools going, do you do any of these activities? No. Why not? I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And equally, a generation of teachers coming in now don't see it as their job as a teacher. In my 20 years, I've football managed. I've done citizenship PHSE, done school trips. My job as a teacher, still as an old school teacher, is about the enrichment of the children. But I think there's a generation of teachers out there who don't see it as, because it's been knocked out of us, because it's about the numbers. And I think we need to regress back to that. And not regress, we need to go back to schools are places of learning. Schools are places of enrichment. Schools are places of community connection. Schools are places that have Sunday fairs. Schools are places that are open to communities. I think a lot of trusts have lost connection with their communities because they're now a business. And I think the lack of governors, PTAs, I've noticed less PTAs, less activity. Parents are getting angry with schools that they're being dictated to. My child's wearing the uniform. No negotiation. I think schools need to reconnect with the communities, and reconnecting with their communities means doing more of the things that we used to have a lot more. And I think, and here's my caveat to that, a relationship with the children is the strongest decider of sometimes that's getting them over the line, even in exam performance. I think if you do those things, you can actually increase the exam performance, because the children will end up having more respect, having more buy-in, because they like their school, they like their teacher, they like their community, they're happier, they're well-rounded, bang, and they're more confident. And at the moment, a lot of schools are just basically a drudgery factory where they are driven down, threatened, told, you must do this, you must do this, you must do this, these exams are everything. And we teachers, sadly, not that we're buying into it, we are judged on that. And I would love to be the teacher sometimes who wants to go, guys, you know what, today, let's have a discussion about something like that. But I have a history curriculum that is so overloaded that I have to do it after school. So I have kids come to me after school and talk about Israel or Palestine or some deep, deep questions they want, because I can't afford the time during lesson time, because my lessons are so structured, so organized, every 5 minutes, pace, because I won't get through the course. Mm-hmm. And yet I want to do all those other things, but I'm being pulled the other way, and that's the problem.
Do you know, there's a very interesting thing that I've found in researching my book. One of the things I did was I interviewed some of my ex-students, and from like 15, in one case almost 20 years ago, and with that distance and that perspective, you can ask them what they hold on to and what they remember. Really interesting. Well, do you know what? So the particular thing that this one lad, he was just this kind of lovely bookish lad who would knock around the English office and talk to us because he didn't have many mates. It was quite a rough and tumble all boys school in London, and we all loved him, but I didn't actually teach him apart from one 6-week stint when I was actually covering the school because I'd already left. It's really, I'd completely forgotten about it, but on interviewing him, he told me, we've been talking around the houses, and he told me that had been an absolutely transformative 6 weeks. Right now, this is me telling you my story of being a great teacher, but it's a very, very interesting one because he says what was transformative was it was in the days when we did the Year 9 SATs, and it was after the Year 9 SATs, and he says, I am slightly ashamed of this, he says, I told them that for the 6 weeks, I wasn't going to make them write in their books at all. And what we did was we read Flowers for Algernon in its entirety. I had a chat about ethics and watched Blade Runner. I think that's cracking. I think that's a cracking bit of teaching.
I think therefore I am.
I totally agree. And I mean, Brent, you'll have learned that Brent can't give a short list. So you see that big long list of things that Brent gave, and dramas and plays and pantomimes and all of those things. But children, it does so much for commitment, for discipline, for relationships,
teamwork,
and all of those things that you mentioned earlier, Sammy. Like, do you know the abstract things, the things that are difficult to quantify? Like confidence. You can't take a handful of confidence out of your pocket, but if you work with children and you put on a play or a pantomime or performance, all of those children will grow in confidence. Yeah. And afterwards, in the period afterwards, you will see that investment in their academic work. I'm completely convinced.
But the problem with all that is it's a time investment from us. But you get so much back. But I think people have lost that connection. I think pandemic has definitely weakened that social
But it's also, you're absolutely right, Brent, but it's also about seeing the whole person and not just 30 children in front of you who need to get 30 A stars, and you're going to game the system as best you can to try and get those 30 A stars because your school needs the numbers and the kudos and everything.
I think the hope is, and I would say this is still the case. There are a lot of us out there still trying to play both. We're still trying to teach the children. I intrinsically love history. I love geography. I love teaching the subject. And I constantly have this constant battle with myself of I have to enjoy what I'm doing. So there's a constant battle of pace. I have to make sure these kids get this done. But then there's those opportunities and lessons where I'm saying, let's have a 10-minute debate. And sometimes you just have to go, you know what, you're not written anything for a half an hour. But they'll ask me the deepest, most meaningful questions. And I think to myself, the back of my mind, I'm going, somebody comes in now and watches this. They're going to criticize me. I have to have the confidence to try and say, I can be a sage in the stage. As far as I'm concerned, these children are learning. Okay, you don't have the evidence in their book. The problem you've got is, if they don't have the evidence at the end of the exams system, that's when I get judged. And I've had that. Sometimes they're going, oh, you're a good teacher, Mr. Poe. The kids really like you, but your exam results aren't what they should be. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I choose here? Do I choose to be that teacher that the kids love, the subject that they really like? But at the end of it, their parents, they in the school want the result. And you have this constant sort of war that goes on. A lot of us have this constant war of, this is how I want to teach. And you get key stage 3s like that. Key stage 3 is so free, and you have great lessons. And then you get the key stage 4, and it's like syllabus, exam, must do this. There's a massive disconnect between, let's do something fun in key stage 3, great curriculum, let's design a curriculum, and then you get the syllabus that is so bloated and so driven. You're almost going like, I've taught you one way, let's do a complete 360. And even the kids go into year 10, where's all the fun? Sorry, fun's over. Yeah. It's my business. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? It is literally, we've taken the fun out of education too much. And that's my anecdotal 20 years experience of it. I even feel myself sometimes, you know, the fun isn't there for me as much. And if it's not there for me as much, is it there for the children as much?
And I wonder, picking up on your point, Brent, and the flip side of that, and we need to move towards the end of the show now. You know, if we've taken the fun out of it, our exams, and is that kind of, you know, pressure, is that, you know, is it contributing to the mental health crisis at the minute, do you think, Sammy?
I think that there is, I think I'm cautious on this, because I think that the mental health crisis is something which is very, very hard to draw the boundaries of and to kind of say where it's coming and what's going on with it. And there is debate around whether or not whether the parameters of the mental health crisis are exactly as they appear, or whether it's about over-reporting and things like that. And, you know, it's really difficult to respond to. But I would certainly say that I think that the system as we have it at the moment is damaging kids in different ways.
Yeah. But then, honestly, I think it always has.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, I failed my 11 plus, and I still carry the scar of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd say every person, but it's how you recover. It's the difference is how you recover. I don't think the same systems are in place, the same rescuing factors, the same family dynamics, the same community, the same sort of, you know, it's all of that comes together, doesn't it, to rescue the situation, doesn't it?
But that's exactly what I was saying earlier as well, about how we need to think about schools as part of a wider network. They don't exist on their own. They can't exist on their own.
No, they can't be islands. They've got to be that connection. And again, I think it goes back to the structural changes. I think where schools need to be more connected to their students, because I mean, it's the weirdest thing today. You see their children, and then they get their exam results, and it's like, hi, and where's the aftercare? You know, where's the follow up after that? There isn't really. They're with their parents. But what do you do with those disadvantaged children who don't have parents? You know, they come home and they get their GCSEs, and there's an empty house there, and it's like, how'd you do today? And there's nobody. You see, and that reinforces all of that. Then there's no system set up for them. And I think, again, you take those statistics with the NEET kid, or the 100, I think it was 1 in 3 children missed an exam. I've never seen attendance so bad in exams. There was kids were having to sort of like come up and pick them up and bust them in. And there's so many kids just disappearing. And then there's so many kids who are going into exam hall and they're falling asleep. They're not sleeping. Vaping was a weird situation where a child wouldn't get out of the toilet because they just wanted to vape. You're like, you're in the middle of your exam. Get into that. Get out of the. You know what I mean? And that's replicated around the country. I think there's a lot of what we're asking them to do, and I don't think they're mentally in the place that they are capable of doing it. And people might go harsh and go, well, in our day, but I don't think you're comparing.
No, it's a different world.
Different world, different generations. They forget they had a support network. I had a support network. My parents picked me back up after I failed and said, look, they supported me all the way through. 2 parents there supporting me all the way through. Family support me all the way. If they don't have that, what happens to them? They just fall off the edge of the cliff, don't they? Anywho, Sammy, you've been a legend.
You were promised 15 or 20 minutes airtime. You've had actually just over an hour. You've had I don't know if you've ever been to Northern Ireland, Sammy, have you?
I haven't actually, no.
Well, you've had something of a Northern Irish experience tonight. You might as well have been, because
are we still like that?
This is what happens when you come to Ireland. Time is different. It doesn't really go by the clock and things like that. But look, you've been absolutely fantastic. I've really loved having you on.
Welcome to come on again.
We could have had an entire
15
show.
minutes.
And I mean, your insight and your knowledge is fantastic, and your vision of what I don't even think we got on to your vision of, you know, what exams and things could be, but you know, looking at some of your material, it's very, very, very interesting. So look, thank you very much.
Great
for coming on our John Catt sponsored show tonight.
Excellent.
Yeah, brilliant. So let's and thank you, Sammy, and we'll say our sponsors before we go, will we?
Okay.
Shall we, Sean? We're going to pop up, Lucy. Thanks, Sammy.
All right, bye.
Oh, So this show is brought to you by John Catt, who is our sponsor, and you can see that we have our little symbol there behind my head, which is there, and you can visit johncattbookshop.com if you want, and you can use the code, the special Teachers Talk Radio code, which is JSE TTR 2425 for 20% off your order. And obviously that's really good for the amount of CPD you're going to get in the next week or two. Or if you're in Scotland, you're already back. Sorry about that. Or if you're in Nottinghamshire, you're back next week. Or, some people are already back at school. Let's just be honest with that. So thank you to John Catt, who was our great. We've got JBL. Oh, I was missing JBL tonight. You're here. Excellent. We're just missing Paul Foz as well.
Yeah.
Paul will probably pop up in a second as we go.
Probably will.
Thank you. That was really good. That was a really good deep discussion. A lot deeper than I sort of envisaged. We didn't really get into too much of the analysis. But I think the big question is, we were saying earlier on, to finish on, that I think there was a missed opportunity in the last 3 or 4 years, because the big question that was asked during COVID was the exam system ain't working. The exam system, and year on year we keep saying the same thing, but nothing changes. And I do like what his idea there, Sammy's saying, is maybe this is the time to start sort of promoting exam. But the problem is, how many problems are there in schools? It's all connected. You can't just do the exam system without doing the league tables, without Ofsted, without it's a big ask, isn't it? But I do think it's very, very important. And I think the way the exam system has to change is mental health. I think that tweet from Amy just starts to resonate to the point where we are asking the question, why are we putting our students with? And just before we go, I do want to read the Naomi. If you just put that up, Lucy, that's the last point I want to make. I don't always agree with Naomi Fisher, but I think she has a really, really good point here. And I think it's a really good summary of the exam system itself. What a strange thing to do to our young people in a culture and time. We make them spend several years learning things they often have no interest in, which they were not chosen, and which they may in every case use again. We tell them that these things are vitally important. Then we sit them in rows and make them think about these things they cannot remember for intense few hours. We compare what they've written down with everyone else at the same age, and then we rank them. We made them make a couple of months, and then we tell them they are success and others are failures. We encourage them to hang their self-worth on how they performed. Newspapers publish pictures of the delighted, whilst the disappointed hide their heads in shame. We tell them that these results will determine the rest of their lives, and that they set up systems to make this true. We provide fewer opportunities for those who do not succeed, and we call them that we can take the pick of the courses while the others make tests again and again, just to hammer it home. To make sure our young people spend the majority of their adolescence focused on exams and pressure, every summer they sit in rows, try to remember. Each year they're told their whole future rests in this. Many merely cave under the pressure. They become anxious and depressed. They show signs of burnout by the age of 16. They lose their spark. They go through motions. Some of them retreat altogether. Then we pathologize them. Then we say they need the mental health treatment and become more resilient. We send them for therapy or give them medication. And then they are the problem while the system carries on unchanged. I could keep going. I don't always agree with Naomi, honestly. I sometimes find it quite frustrating. And we've had a few sort of ding-dongs on Twitter. But I do think on this occasion, I think that is a really good summary of the kind of exam system. And yes, some might disagree with that, but in the main, as a teacher of 20 odd years, I have to say that is pretty accurate to what we asked the students to do. And it does correspond quite a lot with what Sammy was saying as well. Some may disagree with that. If you do, please spark up a conversation. That's what Teachers Talk Radio is all about. Don't forget, you can join Paul and I in a 1 hour show that lasts an hour and a half. Sorry, Lucy. And become one of our mainstay.
Northern Irish time.
Yeah, well, it's all relative, isn't it? But you can join us, obviously, in Teacher Talk Radio if you are interested in this as well. And this should be uploaded onto the old Podbean we can listen back to as well. If you are still enjoying your summer holidays, please continue to enjoy them. If you're back at school, sorry, you've got to get up in the morning, and this is running a bit late. So, there.
Great.
A good night from me.
And good night from me.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.